We'll intervene whenever we decide it's in our national security interest to intervene. And if you don't like it, lump it.
The problem with America is not that we go around marauding around the world imposing ourselves. The problem with America in the last 10, 15 years, since the end of the Cold War, really in the last 60 years, is that we've been too slow to get involved.
I don't know how many Iraqi civilians were killed, but I can assure you that the number is the absolute minimal that it's possible in modern warfare.
Every nation in every region now has a decision to make. Either you are with us or you are with the terrorists.
You know, that land over there is yours. You'll go back to it one day because your fight will prevail and you'll have your homes and your mosques back again because your cause is right and God is on your side.
Welcome to the Darkened Hour.
Welcome to another episode of the Darkened Hour. I'm your host, Adam Fitzgerald. Today we have a special guest, Anthony Shaffer. Anthony Shaffer, a retired U.S. Army Lieutenant Colonel and counterintelligence officer in which he has conducted counterterrorism operations as part of Reforger in 1985 and worked in New York City as part of the Army's anti-terrorism efforts during OPSAIL in 1986. Shaffer also worked at the Air Force Special Activities Center, where he worked as a case officer. In 1995, he transitioned to the Defense Intelligence Agency as part of the consolidation of all service, human intelligence, into the Department of Defense, where he constructed his own task force, Stratus Ivy, a special mission task force that harnessed the skills of officers from the NSA, Army Intelligence, Defense Intelligence Agency. He became part of a covert DIA operations program, Able Danger, where Shaffer, along with a select few from the Land Information Warfare Activity Team, would entail a 9/11 pre-operation offense suite designed to detect, degrade, and counter al-Qaeda capabilities, to which he was completely blackballed by the Department of Defense and unjustly restricted of his security clearance, which later became under investigation by a Senate Judiciary Committee. Shaffer today is the London Center for Policy Research, a New York Times bestselling author of the book Operation Dark Spycraft and Special Ops on the Front Lines of Afghanistan, which details experiences in full, and his latest book, The Last Line, a novel, is a stark warning of how terrorism or terrorists will use the southwest border of the United States to gain access and conduct terrorist activities within the homeland. In 2017, he became the Homeland Security Advisor to the Stafford County Sheriff's Department of Virginia and works as its member of the new NYPD Counterterrorism Bureau's expanded task force. How are you, Mr. Shaffer? Thank you for coming on.
So Adam, yeah, thank you for having me. I appreciate your opening. And as I've said, and I don't mind sharing this with your group, I said off air and I'll say it now publicly, I really appreciate your interest in simply researching and putting out factual information, no matter how it makes people feel one way or another. I appreciate the fact that you're just trying to get, from what I see, factual information out. So thank you for doing that, and thank you for having me today to have this discussion.
Oh, absolutely, and thank you. Well, let's start simple.
Sure.
Let's start with the basics of those who are not aware of your background. When did you first enlist in the military, and where did it lead you last?
So yeah, that's a good question. I've talked a little bit about this, but I'm happy to go into more detail. I was actually an Air Force brat. My stepdad, John Robert Shaffer, was an Air Force logistics officer. I ended up spending time in the Philippines during the Vietnam War. A lot of my early years were there. I have fond memories of trading with Filipino kids through the wire around Clark Air Force Base for things like old Japanese World War II helmets. And you're going to laugh at this, but probably not, hand grenades, unblown, unexploded hand grenades, which had most of the gunpowder carved out. But things like that got my parents really upset because, you know, they had EOD, the explosive ordnance folks, come take it away from me. It's like, gee, I thought it was pretty cool, but they didn't. So anyway, and then spent some time in San Antonio with my dad when he was stationed there, and then we went to Lisbon, Portugal, in the mid 1970s, from 76 through 1980. I actually went to high school at the American International School of Lisbon. And during that time, Adam, is when I really developed my interest in intelligence, because, this is during the Cold War. I don't know if a lot of people understand that Lisbon has always been kind of this place of spying. Ian Fleming actually wrote his first James Bond novel, Casino Royale, based on his time in a place called Estoril, Portugal, where he was an operative. So I actually grew up in Estoril and Cascais and Carcavelos and all these other places in the Lisbon, suburbs. So it was during this time that I started kind of watching our military attaché. We all knew who the chief of station was. His son was in my class. Frank Carlucci Jr., you might know his dad, former ambassador and Secretary of Defense Carlucci. Frank was in my class. So it was a very interesting time. And so I just kind of like, gee, spying, that's kind of interesting. And so from that point on, from high school on, I always thought that one of the best things that any individual could do is try to seek the meaning of what is true, try to find out what the truth is. And I felt that being an intelligence officer, trying to figure out that, what's really going on would be a way of doing it. So after high school, after leaving Lisbon, I had to go back. We went back to Dayton, Ohio, where my dad was stationed at Wright-Patterson. And I had to attend one last year of high school at Stebbins High School in Dayton, near right next to the Wright Plain, where next to the plains of where the Wright brothers had some of their first experimental flights, right next to the Wright-Patterson Air Force Base and the Air Force Museum, Air Museum. And so right after high school, or right during high school, I should say, I actually joined the Ohio Army National Guard before I graduated from high school. I actually joined right when I turned 18. And so I took the oath and started down the path of military service with an eye. Obviously, you don't always know how it's going to turn out, but when I joined the Guard was offering 4 years of college tuition for 8 years of enlistment. And obviously, I had an interest in not just enlisting. I wanted the college degree, but more importantly, I wanted to become an officer, and I wanted to seek out becoming a member of military intelligence, and that's how I started.
In the book Operation Dark Heart, in chapter 2, which is entitled "The Dark Side," you briefly describe about being involved with the Return of Forces in Germany, or the acronym Reforger,
right?
Where you conducted counterterrorism there. Can you describe more about how you became involved with that unit?
Yeah. So, I always try to get as much fact out as I can without getting more in trouble about things that I'm obligated to not talk about in full detail, and I'm always walking on that edge. So.
Right. There's some things you can't talk about.
Right.
I'd rather not.
So the way I'll describe it is that the United States Army, in particular, has always been a lot more aggressive and willing to do things on the margins using resources which are otherwise observable for purposes of trying to achieve specific clandestine objectives. I think that's the best way of describing it. So. Early on, I was in something I found out later was actually a classified program called Key Personnel Upgrade Program, Keep Up. It was actually on my orders going to Germany. And the supposed reason for the program, the public reason is, hey, they would pick people who were showing potential in the Army Reserve and Guard, and putting them in real world situations to see how they perform. So it was just basically a spotting assessing tool. And so, I was actually going through. I was commissioned in 1983. I was still. I was 20. I wasn't even 21 yet when I got commissioned. So I was very young and working all of this. Matter of fact, geez, in '83. Yeah, I was. It was before I turned whatever it is, so 83, and then all this other stuff. We were working aggressively to go after terrorists. So I actually deployed to Germany, and I was integrated in the 165th Battalion, Tactical Exploitation, TE, out of Wiesbaden. And during that time, we did a lot of very cool things. I mean, we were actually running an exercise. I ended up working with the French 13th Regimenti, the Dragones Parachutistes, which is like their special operations unit. Great experience. And we were way further ahead. Army was way further ahead than acknowledged. And by the way, Adam, I kind of attribute the Army's attitude of being aggressive and quiet. I mean, they weren't trying to create trouble. They were trying to create capacity to the environment that the Reagan White House created. I have a number of friends who were on President Reagan's cabinet, Bud McFarlane and others, and they were at the top trying to create room for innovation and creative thinking by the services to do things like getting more people involved in these efforts, trying to be creative and finding people who can do it. So I appreciate having had the opportunity in 83, 84, 85 to kind of be given the chance to go out and do things, because, you know, they would, back during the Cold War, people were judged much more on your ability to accomplish a mission rather than you know, any bad habits or bad attitudes you have. It was more about, hey, can you get this done? Go do it. And so that's how I ended up in 85 going over to Reforger as part of this key personnel upgrade program, and being able to participate in counterterrorism operations, incidental and simultaneous to the Reforger exercise of 85.
You've had a keen interest at a very young age regarding your interest in counterintelligence.
Right.
And in 1987, you actually trained at the Farm, which is the
Right.
CIA intelligence agency training base, and finished top of your class. Now, this led you deeper into the field of technical collection, which is surveillance technology, which is considered the most protected of the programs in the U.S. government.
Right.
You would become part of the U.S. government's most covert operations later on, but this was, however, something you always ascribed to, even when you were young, as outlined in your book.
Yeah, that's I know it's more of a comment, but I think it's a question here. I'll try to answer. I attended a number of training courses. I went through the Army Counterintelligence Special Agent course. I attended something called the Strategic Debriefing School out of Fort Huachuca, both at Fort Huachuca. And then during this time, you know, the Army made an offer to kind of bring me aboard as a counterterrorism guy, as a counterintelligence guy. But the Air Force came along, Air Force Special Activities Center, and made me a better offer. So I ended up going to the Farm to CIA training. At that point in time, it was called Military Operations Training Course, MOTSI. There was two separate courses at the time. That's a whole nother story why they were separate and then merged. But yeah, I ended up, you know, I didn't even know I was the top of my class. They really don't tell you exactly how you're doing until the very end.
Right.
And yeah, I just I enjoyed it, and I was youngest in my class too. I think part of being young and being in that environment is you just really don't care. You just gotta do what you got to do, and you're not really watching and worrying about how well you're going to do. You just do it. And I think that sometimes gives you freedom that others do not, because they're, you know, a lot of the folks were, you know, older officers who've been around a long time, and they were very worried about how well they were doing and would this look good or bad. I just didn't care. And it's like, yeah, I would just go out and do things, which often got me in a lot of trouble. There was one exercise where we had to go out, and it was called an IIR, Intelligence Information Report exercise, where basically your job was just to go out and take photos and write up the description of a target. That's it. I mean, and so I was given a local radio station, and I'm sorry, strike that. I was given a pier to go and look at, a spot in the water. And then my friend, the class leader, John Tempone, John was given a radio station. And so we decided to cooperate, because I was already doing media stuff. So I knew about radio stations, and he was a Marine, so he knew about piers. So we kind of worked together. We kind of cooperated. So next thing you know, I'm going into the radio station pretending to be a member of a nonprofit. Well, I didn't know you couldn't do that. Next thing you know, I'm getting yelled at, like, I can't believe you went in there and told these people you were X. Like, well, what, I had the card. It's like, no, my God, you can't do that. It's like, what, I got in, I got the information, and I got out. So it was very funny that even in spy school, I was getting in trouble for, like, well, you told me to go do it. Oh, we didn't tell you. We didn't mean do it that way. It's like, oh. So it was a very early lesson that, yeah, they're going to tell you go do something, but if they want to get you, they're going to get you because
Yes.
there's all these things. So I still came out of the top of the class because I was just, willing to do things, but it was a good object lesson, which I guess I didn't get because I kept doing things like that through my entire career.
Sure.
Just if I'm given a mission, I want to go out and do it, try to figure it out and make it work. And I was far more worried about mission accomplishment than I was the politics behind trying to make my leaders happy. So I mean, it's a really weird way of saying it, but I answered to people who wanted me to accomplish the mission, not the politicians who were afraid that we might get in trouble while trying to accomplish the mission. That's I think it's a better way of saying what I had to do during that time.
Sure. Just to add also too, if there are certain things that Mr. Shaffer cannot explain, it's due to the fact that in the book Operation Dark Art, there are many high-level black operations that he's involved in. So the book itself is heavily redacted. So if there's certain questions I ask here and he can't answer it in full, it's because he's not allowed to, even at the current time. So my next question would be, you have become involved in creating your own task force,
right?
Which was Stratus Ivory, which conducted direct support to the Department of Defense and their compartmental activities,
right?
Focusing on offensive information operations. Now, can you elaborate further on this without stepping on your own toes?
Yeah, no, I'd be happy to. As a matter of fact, I've since that book was written, within the last year, I've made additional protected disclosures to members of Congress regarding some things which, even after all this time, I mean, we're talking about a long time ago when I was doing this and things which were going on. I've made some additional protected disclosures recommending Congress open certain investigations based on certain things that are going on within media today. And I will simply state, Adam, that if one looks at the way information is being suppressed, manipulated, or otherwise funneled, it looks a lot like things I knew about 20 years ago, just saying. Yeah. So that's, while I can't get in specifics because of security obligations, some of the things we may have been working on would have had a lot of the same effects I'm seeing happen these days, if that makes sense to you and your audience.
Yes.
So I've reported some things which I have great concerns about. But let's go back to the task force. So the very thing I just alluded to, Stratus Ivy was a hybrid task force that was created. I just basically was given all these missions, asked to go do them, and then basically we were organizing. We were organizing my task force around the missions. We had three areas we were focused on. First was, as you alluded to, highly compartmented Office of Secretary of Defense black programs that were examining, looking at how to weaponize technology, I think is the best way to summarize that. This relates to the protected disclosure I just mentioned. I can't go much more into detail than I have, other than to say, a lot of folks understood the potential of the internet back in the late 90s and were working hard to weaponize all of it back then. And this is long before a lot of folks I knew back in those days, Adam, half the colonels I knew didn't know how to use a computer. I mean, it just was a different age. And so the things we take for granted today, data mining, the instant communicate, all those things were still just concepts. So I can say with a great deal of authority that indeed the issue of how to weaponize these things was being thought. So that's one area. Second area was essentially support to special mission units. SOCOM, Special Operations Command. So Able Danger was a concept that was created by General Hugh Shelton. Basically, General Shelton, chairman of the Joint Chiefs in '99, worked with General Pete Schoomaker, the commander of Special Operations Command, to create essentially a new concept. People tend to forget that the Able Danger was the first time Special Operations Command was the lead operational sync. That is to say, they were the ones being told, go do this. Normally, Special Operations Command up to that time would support regional command syncs, regional commands, EUCOM, CENTCOM, PACOM. They would support other commands rather than be the lead. So this was the first time the SOCOM was the global lead. They were the ones told to go do it. This is significant. And as you mentioned in the opening, it was very specifically to identify and then on call, basically disrupt, deny, degrade al-Qaeda. That was it. The guidance was very clear. The how-to was not clear, because this was the first time the U.S. government, Special Operations Command in particular, had been told, go figure out how to fight a global war without regard to borders, with going after a non-linear, non-geographic target. So this was very controversial at the time, and a lot of folks in the Pentagon did not support it. Now we could talk, we could talk a whole day about the internal problems I faced at the Pentagon just trying to support this. One thing about bureaucracies do not like change. They do not like to be challenged. And since we were coming in as a new entity, Stratus Ivy was new, both by the fact that we were looking at new technologies, and we weren't part of the counterterrorism mafia. We weren't one of those organizations which had been working this for decades and failing. So the moment we step up and say, hey, we're going to take a shot at this, we were instantly hated. So there was a lot of friction just by the fact that we were being asked as an outside entity to come into these other people's rice bowls and start doing things. And I think that was another point of controversy why the Pentagon didn't want to talk about all of this in the mid-2000s, because it was very embarrassing to see all the effort made by Pentagon seniors to stop what we were doing, because it was different. But that's how Stratus Ivy started, as a task force. We were doing things others would not. And then Stratus Ivy was linked into Able Danger, Special Operations Command, when I was actually down on a reserve tour. I was actually down, I think, in late '99. And this is something that's fairly well disclosed now. You know, we in the military intelligence community, the case officers, most of us have maintained some level of reserve affiliation, so we can use that, to go out as a military officer when we need to. So as a reservist, I would go down and I would work at JSOC at Fort Bragg or SOCOM in Tampa and do my reserve tours. So during my reserve tour in the summer of 1999, I was actually attached to the Human Support Element, HSE, at SOCOM. And I was asked by Al Downs, the DIA rep, the Defense Intelligence Agency rep to Special Operations Command, to brief General Schoomaker, the sync, on my Stratus Ivy mission and functions at a top secret code word only briefing. And I got authorization to brief him. So I know your audience is going to have a hard time believing this, because it's not usual. But yeah, a major, a U.S. Army Reserve major, ended up spending about an hour with General Pete Schoomaker, briefing him on what I was doing on these advanced activities my unit was conducting. And during that meeting, General Schoomaker looked over at his deputy and said, get Shaffer read into Able Danger immediately. And that's how it all started. Basically, I was told by the commander, by the 4-star general, hey, you need to be part of this project. And since he was tasked by General Shelton to do the project, that's how I, as an individual, and my unit, the Stratus Ivy, ended up supporting this counterterrorism effort known as Able Danger.
Well, I was going to even say that I think due to your previous background with counterintelligence itself, also helped make them make that decision involving you with the program itself, Excuse me.
Sure.
Who else was who else was involved with Able Danger? I don't know if you want to get into that, but
No, I do.
Yeah, sure.
So it's a great question, Adam, and I think people still don't understand. And when they did the investigation of this, by the way, I still owe you a document. I'll send this to you regarding the lead investigator of Able Danger, a guy named Crane, John Crane, who became a whistleblower himself and has made statements saying that they had verified what I'm about to tell you, but they chose to basically ignore it or make it look like I was off the reservation. So let's talk about the 99 and 2000. So that's it. That's the issue. Is like how do you put together a unit and a task force to do something that's never been done before? No one had ever looked at globally a terrorist threat. Yeah, we dealt with terrorism. We dealt with the Red Army faction. We dealt with the folks in the Philippines. There was groups there. There's always been terror, but we had never looked at that at terrorism from a global perspective until then. Al-Qaeda had become a global threat. They had already attacked the embassies in Africa. During this period, we didn't know at the time, but we found out later they were planning the coal attack in Yemen. So we were given this challenge of how do you go about trying to identify and map as part of a campaign, a cohesive campaign. And again, military, Adam, we've done campaigns for decades. We did campaigns in Europe during World War II. We did, we know how to do campaigns, but we know how to do it against a regional threat using conventional methods. So how do you go after a terrorist organization that's created a shadow organization globally? I mean, this is like a James Bond movie. It's like Spectre. So we were saddled with that. And so when the SOCOM team came to me, and I worked with some very bright officers, I'll just state one of their names, Captain, then Commander Scott Philpott. Scott was a tech guy. He was a Navy fleet guy. He was a Brown Navy guy. He did a lot of littoral stuff. But he's very bright, very smart on technology. So he became kind of my primary partner, and trying to figure out how do we do this, because we had colonels and captains who really had never dealt with technology before. I remember one time I did an update. I was asked to come down to SOCOM and do an update on the project to General Schoomaker's staff. And so I came in, and Adam, I know this is a bit long-winded, but I think it's important to understand the context of the time. This was, I think, the spring of 2002 now. No, I'm sorry, 2000. And I came in, and I had 4 briefing slides, a very short briefing. I mean, for those in the military, four slides is nothing. People will do decks of 20, 30 slides, PowerPoint, death by PowerPoint. I just didn't believe in it. So it was all black and white, no graphics, 4 slides. And I estimated it would take me, I don't know, maybe 15 minutes to do the update to General Schoomaker. He's a bright guy. So next thing I know, I'm told, no, you have an hour on the calendar, and you're going to have all these people in the room with you. It's like, I can't fill an hour. It's like, don't worry about it. Yeah, just do it. So I go into this briefing with General Schoomaker with about 12 other senior officers, colonels and generals. And as I'm briefing, every time I go to, these are very short slides, I would go to a billet and start briefing it. General Schoomaker would take over and say, hey, this is what he's doing, and this is why he's doing it. So what happened was General Schoomaker took the opportunity to use my briefing and my activities to educate his staff on what we were doing. It turned into an hour and a half. And so I'd never seen anything like it, where he would take what I was doing and use it as a teaching point. And so at the end of this briefing, I went up to one of the colonels who was on my side and I worked with, and Scott. And so I said, how many people do you think really understood what General Schoomaker just did? And out of the 15 people in the room, Scott said probably 3 or 4 maybe got it. And that was the point. Nobody understood how to use technology and adapt it to this new environment. It was It was the Wild West. Nobody understood. So that was what we were faced with: is how do you organize and conduct these operations in a way using technology and, frankly, authorities no one had ever had before. And that's why, even to this day, Adam, there are two components, two elements, sub projects of Able Danger I still can't legally talk about, because it had to do with these new authorities, which at the time were very controversial. Which, by the way, I was trying to get to President Trump, and I was hoping he would declassify these things so we can talk about them. I think these are things that the American people need to understand exist and were created, because I think as much as we created them for the right purposes, in the wrong hands, they can be abused badly. So this is one of my ongoing and remaining concerns about us working back in those days to create certain things which, left, to their own devices without proper oversight, could be badly abused. And we've seen NSA abuse their authority regarding data mining. We've seen them abuse their authority regarding targeted collection. So I'm one of those who believes that while we created these things with the best intentions, people don't always have their oath of office in mind when they do certain things. So, but anyway, that's the backdrop of what was going on during our creation of Able Danger as an operation.
Even almost right from the outset of the program itself, it was met with resistance and a non-committal of even other agencies. And my next question is the following: is that at about the same time in 96, 97, the CIA was running their own virtual station, which is called the Bin Laden Issue Station.
Right.
And you met with CIA representatives from Alex Station at SOCOM headquarters
in
Fort Bragg. And the CIA reps were quite adamant that they would not even share information with you or with the U.S. Army Special Operations Command, due to the fact that the CIA wanted to be the primary agency involved with data collection. It seemed the CIA considered the Able Danger program a threat to your unit. Was that the case, or is this basically about interagency infighting?
Yeah. So, Adam, just right now, let me say this for the record. We may have to go do a second session, because I'm going to take a lot of time to explain this.
No, that's fine.
Yeah, I mean, we maybe want to do a part two of this, because so I'm more. I think it's important to understand the context of what was going on. Yeah. So right after, within I think 3 days, within 3 days of me being read into Able Danger as a formal operation, Dave Rolfe was the CIA officer assigned to Special Operations Command. I knew Dave very well. Dave was a former Army counterintelligence, Army colonel. So Dave was one of those guys who came through the Army program, converted over to CIA. Great. Dave's great. I have no bad words to say about Dave, but Dave Rolfe was there. I first met and worked with Dave while he was he was a CIA rep to Defense Human Service. So I knew Dave fairly well. We had a cordial working relationship. So Scott Philpott comes to me and says, "Hey, it's great that you understand this, but we have a problem with CIA. CIA is refusing to cooperate. So would you go in and sit down and talk to Dave and explain to him what we're doing and how it's different than what Alex Station is doing?" So yeah, look, I was more than happy to sit down and try to reason with CIA. I mean, since I was CIA trained, I understood their system. I've been integrated a number of times in operations. I've run joint operations with CIA, so I understood their system very well. And we could, I could get into that another day, but there's still ongoing operations that I created at INSCOM that are still ongoing, that they're still being run by CIA. So I understand their system. I went in to sit down with Dave, and so I spent probably about an hour just briefing Dave on what Able Danger was. Basically, to summarize it for your audience, Alex Station was going after bin Laden. They had a specific, what they call a finding. It's considered a covert operation because the ultimate outcome, covert versus clandestine. Covert, by definition, means that you're going to see an observable. Something's going to happen that cannot be otherwise explained away. So in this case, the finding was to assassinate bin Laden. That's it. And I think this has been well documented by a number of folks who were assigned at Alex Station. So that's what they were doing. That's what their effort was, to find and kill bin Laden. We didn't care. It's like, yeah, you guys go off and do your assassination stuff. That's not our job. Able Danger was to map, and as I mentioned earlier, Adam, to on call, take action, be so aware of their system that the moment they try to do something, we could cut their muscle and stop it. That's how intimate, that's how much detail we wanted to know about their system. It's like, yeah, we go chase bin Laden. That system is not going to go away. We thought that al-Qaeda as an entity, no matter who was in charge, would be a long-term threat. That's why we wanted to study it. So they wanted the head, we wanted the body. So Adam, I sat there and I went through with Dave for an hour. And Dave at the end of it looked at me and says, Tony, no, I can see now that there's a complete difference of mission and focus, that there's no competition. And he looked at me and says, but CIA will never cooperate. And so I sat there and I said, Dave, I just explained to you that we're not competing with you. He says, yeah, but you don't understand. It doesn't matter. CIA will see this as a threat, because if you're successful and they're not, you will get credit and they won't. Therefore, they will see it. Even if there's no operational overlap, they will see it as a threat, because if you're successful, you will steal credit from them. And that's like, that was a big lesson for me, and a big reality, which I think resulted in the huge infighting, which the American public is now, I think, mostly aware of during that period. But that was it. And no matter, and Dave even made the effort to go to George Tenet to try to set up a meeting between Schoomaker and himself on this issue. As a matter of fact, at the time, I was briefing George Tenet. People don't understand that DOD has its own authorities basically to do things. So we would go over as a courtesy and update Tenet on some of the other activities I was doing about once every 6 months during this period. And to deconflict, I mean, we generally didn't want to see something happen. As a matter of fact, some of the operations we were running, Adam, we were actually doing jointly with CIA, just through the CIA. CIA is so complex. Some of CIA doesn't even understand what CIA does. Just saying, there's some piece, they have layers of security on top of layers of security. So it's kind of ironic. One time I was briefing Tenet on something we were doing, and he had no idea that CIA was doing something. So it was a bit funny. Anyway, so I would see Tenet on a periodic basis, but it wasn't my job to basically get Tenet and General Schoomaker together. So that was something we were working. But to my knowledge, that meeting never happened because CIA wouldn't take the meeting. They didn't want to deconflict because, again, I think they really felt that they would, if we were successful in our mission and they were not, that would create them not looking as good as they would hope to look otherwise.
And this would have later ramifications.
Absolutely.
Regarding with 9/11 itself.
Right.
Because the CIA also at Alex Station had not, they felt that the FBI's I-49 unit, which was the New York City counterintelligence unit, was also a threat to them as well, even though the FBI clearly didn't have the capabilities or the funding that the CIA had, and they kept them out of the loop.
No, we could talk another day about that as well, because, and maybe you have a question already on this. The reason I was trying to work to pass information regarding what we discovered to the FBI is because I was integrated with FBI's Washington field office on another operation regarding 17 November in Athens, Greece. So that's a whole nother story where FBI and CIA were in conflict. As a matter of fact, at one point during that investigation, CIA officers in Athens were being considered for investigation because there was a belief that they were cooperating. They had helped create and were cooperating with 17 November. And FBI was considering indicting them over what they believed to be FCI's cooperation with international terrorism. So, yeah.
Oh, fast forward to December of '99.
Yeah.
Yourself and the Able Danger team announced that al-Qaeda did indeed have a presence inside the United States,
Right.
and that its infrastructure is much broader than originally ascertained.
Right.
The LIWA, the Land Information Warfare Activities Unit, even constructed a very intricately detailed chart which showed a high number of al-Qaeda operatives around the world and all connected, which showed two cells active inside the United States, one involving Omar Abdel-Rahman and the other Mohamed Atta.
Right.
Your data through open source information amassed to an amazing 3 terabytes. However, according to Scott Philpott, any data involving Atta and his unit were considered off limits due to their status of being U.S. citizens. Which agency labeled Atta and his unit citizens, and did this inhibit Able Danger from investigating them further?
Yeah, great question. And let me be as concise as possible, because this is another area I could talk for probably half an hour. So yeah, the data was Army's. Army had consolidated this data through a number of overt sources. Now, one of the things, just to, let me throw this in there for maybe our next discussion. One of the reasons that this was so sensitive is that one of the areas of the open source data, and I'm using open source with air quotes, is that one of the subcontractors had hired a researcher to do research on individuals traveling in and out of mosques.
Yes.
Now, yeah, so yeah, that's technically, it's overt. But one of the controversial points was, well, is that collection or research? You know, would you otherwise have to announce the fact that you're U.S. intelligence and you're collecting on essentially protected First Amendment activities? Now, you and I may agree to disagree on this. I don't know what your belief is, but I believe that if any religion is contemplating allowing its members to conduct attacks against others, either of their faith or not of their faith, and considering doing terrorist acts, well, I think your freedoms under the First Amendment are considered null and void. I think you should be targeted. I'm sorry, you know, that's my belief. It's a bit controversial, I'm sure, but that was my take regarding this research. So essentially, the DoD IG verified this later, that one of our researchers, the researchers on the project hired by the Army, was targeting basically the comings and goings of individuals signing in and out of mosques, and that was globally. So we were tracking via this kind of their own, how they track each other, the way that that we were monitoring them. Absolutely. And so that information was put into this overt database. And by the way, Adam, to this day, SOCOM will not give up. He will not give up the overt database. And I've heard the lawyers continue to use this argument. Wow, we don't know if we would consider that research as either research or collection. So that's kind of the broad justification they've given lawyers I've spoken to of why they won't give up this overt information. And let me be clear. That information was completely overt. There was nothing obtained through classified methodology. But to this day, they won't let people look at the database. That's a huge clue for you guys too. Why, if SOCOM has nothing to hide, why don't they just give up the database? It's been what, 20 years? What are you worried about? So anyway, not to make too light of this, but yeah, we had this was an overt database, but INSCOM, Land Information Warfare Activity, had come up with some very sophisticated tools. Parentage was one of them. There was a couple others, which were data aggregation and amalgamation that they could basically go through and explore this stuff. And you mentioned 2 terabytes. Look, I've got on a Dell computer before me a 2 terabyte hard drive. Back in those days, 2 terabytes was the size. The hard drives were the size of a bowling ball plus. And so we were, and by the way, it would take 6 months to basically do an overt, essentially downloading of internet information. What took 6 months then would take 2 minutes now to do the crunching. But we took all this data with very then unsophisticated tools compared to what's available now, and downloaded, amalgamated, aggregated,
and then use these advanced tools to basically look for patterns. And Adam, this is very simple. This is not complicated. You know, while people have a hard time wrapping their mind around it, it's not that complicated. LIWA, Dr. Eileen Pricer and the LIWA folks took and digitized. They built algorithms which were based on the 83 World Trade Center bombers. They basically took digital models of all those individuals who were involved in that, and they built an algorithm that said, hey, look for people who have these characteristics in all this data. Mm-hmm. So basically, you're putting together a search program based on known profiles to go out and look for others. That's it. That's how we did it. Mm. They went out looking in all this data for individuals who met those profiles and then were linked together. That's what we did. And at the time, it was like, oh, it had never been done before. Now it's done routinely. I mean, you know, there's visual analytics, analyst notebook. All these things do what we're talking about in real time. Back in the days when we were doing this, they didn't exist. Mm-hmm. But that's what it was. Essentially, is you're taking and building profiles of known terrorists, taking terabytes of data and saying, algorithm, you go look for people who match this. And that's how we came up with the identification of those individuals you mentioned and identified the cells which were present in the United States. Well, it became controversial beyond what I just described, because now that process is routine, was the fact that first off, we found individuals who were here. These individuals were found to be within the United States. And the DOD lawyers, that's the key, DOD lawyers using the Gorelick memo, basically said, first off, if they're here legally, you have to consider them U.S. persons, and you can't look at them, which I thought was like, excuse me? If they're linked to a terrorist organization, EO 12333 says we can look at it. Oh, we don't agree. Well, I disagree. You know, so I was battling lawyers constantly over like, I don't agree with you. If they're linked to a terrorist organization, we should be looked at. And so, no, we were told, no, and so since this wasn't my data, this was SOCOM's data. SOCOM had to live with their rules. I didn't. I fought it constantly. But my, DIA lawyers would fight me on it too. It was a constant struggle. And then secondly, because they were here legally, you can't look at them. You have to destroy the data. It's like, no, I don't think that's a good idea. We don't want to destroy the data. And this is where Army came into it, because Army then said, look, this is our data. We don't want it destroyed. So this was, Adam, you wouldn't believe the amount of time I spent dealing with this nonsense.
I bet.
So we ended up briefing General Ellis, the desk ops of the Army. We briefed a number of leaders, Bob Newman, General Newman, the desk into the Army, because we were trying to save the data. General Shinseki, Eric Shinseki got involved as the chief of staff of the Army. So in the end, we lost. The data was directed to be destroyed, and we basically had to go to Texas in the summer of 2000 to recreate it, because the lawyers were so adamant about destroying all of this. Now, Adam, I don't think it was ever destroyed. I've been told that it's still out there somewhere. But again, nobody wants to look at it because they know what they're going to find. Again, this goes back to, if you got nothing to hide, just let people look at it and make their own assessment. This is what we said as the Able Danger team from the beginning, is like, just put it out there. Let people look at it. Let them make their own decision on what they see. And they won't do it. So this is something that I continue to believe that Congress should call for and demand. Like, I don't care what political party you're in. Heck, Joe Biden himself was in the hearing, the first hearing on Able Danger in August of 2005. And he said, we need to get to the bottom of this. So what better than Joe Biden himself now to call for, hey, release all the Able Danger information. I mean, anyway, I'm sorry I'm getting off track here, but going back to 99 and 2000, we had to, in 2000, the lawyers said, destroy the data, and then you can't share it. The Gorelick memo got in the way of sharing, because I ended up trying to arrange the data to be passed to the FBI, to WFO, to the bin Laden unit, 3 separate times. And all 3 times, DoD lawyers stopped it, stopped the sharing of the data I just told you about. And to this day, nobody can actually explain, other than saying, well, the Gorelick memo prevented us from doing it, as a reason why they wouldn't do it. And by the way, as you might know, Jamie Gorelick, the author of the Gorelick memo, was a member of the 9/11 Commission.
Right.
I believe she was there to cover her own tracks rather than actually get to the bottom line, the truth of what happened.
Now, just to add a little bit of follow-up to that, it was later on during the 2006 Senate Judiciary Committee where you seemed to be a little bit vindicated here, where William Dugan, who was a representative of the Department of Defense, actually was asked a question by our own inspector regarding whether Atta was a U.S. person or not, and Dugan reluctantly agreed that he was.
Right.
So yes, it was actually well within your personal interest to collect data from this individual who had an obvious connection to known terrorists inside the cell itself.
Right.
Now, you already answered about whether that data was shared outside of Able Danger. Could I ask, could that information still be ascertained, or is it classified?
Well, Adam, I believe the data, this is part of the controversy about my disclosure. I had a copy of a lot of the data in my own holdings in a DIA at Clarendon. DIA had an office in Clarendon, Virginia, right on top of the metro. It's not there now, but at the time, one of my 3 operational locations was on the 2nd floor of Clarendon, and the Able Danger team would leave pieces of their briefing, because they were up all the time out of Tampa, and they would come up and brief people over at the Pentagon. So, I was kind of storing stuff for Philpott and others, and one of the elements I was storing from is the summary of their data, the unclassified data. I had a copy of that. And so this has been one of the most controversial points, because the IG says they couldn't find it, and I would argue they couldn't find it because they didn't, either it was taken before they got to my spaces or got to the material, or they found it and won't talk about it. As a matter of fact, this is a good question for John Crane. I've never asked John directly about if they found it or not, but that's the point. I believe it's unclassified because the sources and methods that were used were essentially research and amalgamation of unclassified. Now, was there a classified database? Yes. The whole purpose of Able Danger was, in the data mining effort, was to take the open source data and then put it into a classified system and compare it to the classified data to basically do it to confirm or refute the data. Basically create data sets which are validated. That's what we were seeking to do. And off those validated data sets, then you put together your operational plans. You take the data, you analyze it, you validate it. The nodes which are created to show where your terrorists are at, then you target. That's it. It's a very refined process, very much elegant in its process. And by the way, those target sets that were created as part of Able Danger, Steve Cambone, the senior intelligence guy for Don Rumsfeld, actually said in open hearings that the target packages created by Able Danger were the ones used by the Pentagon right after 9/11. So apparently we got it right, but they don't want to acknowledge that. And this is one of those things too, Adam, that the media was in the hearing, but they seem to gloss over Cambone saying this, and so, but yes, so that was the purpose of all of this data, is for purposes of targeting. But going back to the question, I think it was very clear that we were trying to establish these validated sets of basically making it all ultimately classified, both by the fact you've combined the unclassified with classified data for validation and vetting. And then that becomes part of larger targeting packages, which you don't disclose. You don't talk about who you're targeting, how you're targeting, and all that. But the fundamental unclassified data was unclassified. And I do believe that should be released, because I think, again, there's no better way than determining if if it showed what we says it showed or not. That's what I find kind of compelling. It's like, gee, you keep calling us all liars, but you won't put the data out there that will prove your point, and that kind of says something. So yeah, so I think there are unclassified data sets that came out of the original project. I think they should be released. I've always said this. I've never changed that once.
You know, it seemed that even after all the restrictions and the negative thoughts about the program, what you guys went through in the unit, after the 9/11 attacks, it was Dr. Eileen Presser who called you for a meeting. And it was here that she showed you one of the Leawood charts from January 2000, which showed a picture of Mohamed Atta. And now, you were right all along. The program was right. It produced the data that showed that Atta himself and you guys were on the right track. How did it make you feel to know your program, which produced pertinent data, was denied further operations by SOCOM and from every other agency?
Well, I was pissed. I was instantly pissed, and then kind of sickened. It's like, Jesus Christ. Well, I get this question a lot, Adam, and I got browbeat by the Senate Intelligence Committee over this. Like, well, why didn't you recognize how important this was? It's because this wasn't the only black operation we were supporting. You know, back during the 99-2000 timeframe, and I mentioned this earlier, Adam, I briefed Schoomaker on kind of everything we were doing. And that's why I said, wow, based on everything you're doing, we want you to do this too. So, you know, did we recognize that al-Qaeda was bad before the attacks? Absolutely. But they weren't the only threat. So after the fact, when Eileen came to me and showed me this, it's like, yeah, oh my God, we were right. And it really pissed me off. And so she then took it upon herself to go see Stephen Hadley, the Deputy National Security Advisor to Condoleezza Rice. And I'll never forget this, because this was in that right after 9/11 timeframe, and everybody was scrambling trying to. By the way, we met. I remember later because it was in Einstein's bakery, shop that she laid this all out on the table. As you know, they kept saying, "Well, there's Starbucks don't have a lot of room." It's like, yeah, no, it was, and I remember it's like this bagel place. We did it, and she opened up the chart. So it's like, oh my God! And I asked her what she was going to do, and she did. She took it to Stephen Hadley, and then I kind of let it go. It's like, okay, someone's working this, because at the time, Adam, we were then preparing to go to war. You know, we're launching into Afghanistan. I ended up getting recalled to active duty. I was pretty pissed. I was going to basically sit the war out and be an admin officer. I was going to accept recall to being a major and sit it out. Next thing you know, I'm in command. I mean, if I did not seek command, I was in charge of an operating base. There's a whole, that's part of if you want to know about that, it's in Dark Art. I write in great detail about how that all happened. But I was going to sit out the war. I was just disgusted after seeing how we were stopped by the bureaucracy from doing our job. So it's just kind of like, I'm going to help out. I just don't want to be at the cutting edge. I'm just tired. I'm tired of the bullshit. I'm sorry I use that language, but it's just that up. So right after that, as I was getting ready to go on active duty, one day Eileen calls me, and I've got my mobile phone. I'm on the Memorial Bridge running towards the Lincoln Memorial. And she says, "You'll never guess where I'm at." And I said, "No, where?" She says, "She's at the National Security Council, and she's briefing Stephen Hadley with a chart, turning it over to him." And so, and this was like, I think, October of 2001. So Adam, I thought, hey, I'm done.
Right.
It's with the right people. They're going to look at this now, and it's all going to be fixed. So that's where I was. I could have never been more wrong. I had no idea that simply having her trying to do the right thing, we're trying to do the right thing, would become such the controversy it ended up being eventually, that we now face. So, by the way, I see we're at an hour. We may want to set up a second session, because this is a lot to digest, and I know that I've got to get on to some other things here shortly. But
that's all right. I have two questions.
Sure. Okay. We'll try to get through them, but I think we may want to get through some additional details on this too, if you want.
Absolutely. Sure.
Keep going. So yeah.
All right. Fast forward to October 23rd, 2003, the day you say in your book changed your life and your military career. You are personally interviewed by 9/11 Commission's Director Philip Zelikow and his staff.
Yeah.
Take us through what happened on that day.
So yeah, I mean, bad. So yeah, from the time on the bridge from October 2001 to October 2003, 2 years have gone by, and now I'm deployed. I'd been in command of operating base Alpha. We were chasing terrorists. I can't go into details, everything we were doing again, but we launched one of the first covert operations right after 9/11. That's a whole nother story. Great op. It was a textbook in some ways, and others it was not, but it was good. Anyway, so after I step out of command, I'm now deployed. I'm now getting ready to become the HSE, the Human Support Element for Task Force 121 from a Crystals Task Force. This is kind of right before that. 121 was rolling into town. I was working for my boss, Colonel Negro in the book. He was a great guy working in leadership targeting. And so Zelikow shows up. And so, it's in the book. I'll summarize it because people can go read it. When Zelikow shows up, we're told in the morning briefing, the 9/11 Commission is visiting. If anybody has information they feel relevant to their investigation, step forward. You should go talk to them. So I raised my hand. I said, look, hey, I don't know if this is relevant or not. They probably already heard of it, but we were doing something called Able Danger before 9/11. Is it okay if I go talk to Zelikow? I didn't know Zelikow. I just said, if I go talk to him. And they said, yeah, sure. Write up a one-page summary and turn it in. As a matter of fact, I kept an unclassified version of that one-page summary that I gave to the congressional and IG investigators years ago. So they had it. And so I wrote it up, turned it in, and sure enough, later that afternoon, Zelikow and his staff were in there. And so, again, I don't want to recreate the wheel because people can go out and read what I said, but I basically outlined that, yeah, we had this pre-9/11 operation, Able Danger. We were focused on al-Qaeda. We found, through our data mining, we found one of the two of the three cells, to include Mohamed Atta. I talked to him about the problems we had with CIA because we had an asset inside of Afghanistan. We were planning to do some very sophisticated operations to penetrate al-Qaeda, and CIA ended up killing that op, stealing the op. So I talked about that as well. I don't remember the national file number. We track our sources by national file numbers, NFNs. So I mentioned the NFN. I don't remember it off the top of my head, but we mentioned that too. So I probably had about a half an hour, 20 minutes to half an hour with them. And it was like the room was silent. I mean, people were stunned. And it's like, I thought, and I said, I thought you must have already heard about this. And they hadn't heard about it. So at the end of the session, Zelikow comes up, gives me his card and says, and I was an alias. And so when he came up to me, I said, look, I'm here an alias, and I don't want to say my alias because they always get upset about it. It's out there if people want to find it. I said, when I will contact you in my real name, Tony Shaffer, he said, please do. What you said today is very important, and we need to follow up. So I did. I end up following up in January when I'm back from deployment, and the guy I talked to says, yeah, we remember you. I'll call you back and set up a time for you to come in. And then 2 weeks go by and nothing. I call him back and it's like, yeah, we already found all the information on Able Danger. We don't need you to come in now. It's like, really? That's weird. And that's how I was kind of shoved aside by the 9/11 Commission. First, a great deal of interest. And then, yeah, we got everything we need. We don't need you to come in, which is really strange. Because I told them, I was like, I got a whole set of documents on Able Danger that you're welcome to look at. I'll give them all to you because, we did figure that there would be some controversy about this. So we kept a copy of the documents just in case. So
there was a whole lot more, but I'm going to link the book to the bottom of the podcast as
Sure.
well. And my last question to you would be, on August 14th of 2005, you get in contact with Kurt Weldon anonymously at first.
Well,
and then
no.
I think you met with him.
No, it was never anonymous. Let me clarify that because I think there's some disinformation out there. So the Navy I was attached. Scott Philpott comes back
Hmm.
in late 2004 and starts working for an organization called Deep Blue. Deep Blue is the Navy's internal think tank. And so Scott contacts me and says, hey, what are you doing as a reservist? Well, I'm not doing anything, so I've been suspended. I was going through my security clearance revocation process, which nobody could figure out why I was being, I was like, this is kind of over 3 minor, allegations, which
Right.
I don't think, we spoke about yesterday. I'll be happy to kind of go through briefly. DIA did an extensive 2-year inspector general investigation of me regarding my time in command of operating base Alpha and everything else, where their allegation was I filed a false voucher going to Command and General Staff College at Fort Dix, New Jersey for $120. And by the way, just for the audience to understand, I went. I could prove I went. It wasn't like it was false. And then when they figured out I could prove it, it's like, well, you purposely commingled funds. Like, I put it on a voucher and it was approved. It went through 3. Anyway, so the allegation, I stole $120. That's one of the allegations. Second allegation is I misused a cell phone. And Adam, you're going to love the amount. Over a 2-year period, I abused a cell phone to the grand amount of $76.76. 2 years, that's right, 2 years, 18 months of cell phone. And they figured out that, there was, we chalked up $76 of bad fees to you.
Right.
I mean, I'll write you a check for God, but that was fraud. By the way, that was fraud. That's fraudulent. And then the illegal or the improper award of the Defense Meritorious Service Medal for something called able danger. It's you can't make this up. So it's like, no, here's the evidence. I worked on able danger. Here's the paperwork. And their allegation was, well, you somehow convinced General Dayton to award you the medal. It's like, Adam, to this day, I've never met General Dayton. I have no idea. I mean, I know who he is. I've never met the man. I've never met him, never spoken to him, not once. Yet somehow, magically, I convinced this man to award me the medal. So those 3 allegations were being used to permanently revoke my security clearance by Defense Intelligence Agency. During the same time, the Army was about to promote me to lieutenant colonel. So literally, both organizations looked at the allegations. Army dismissed them as saying, this is just stupid. And I was promoted to lieutenant colonel, and the same allegations were used by DI to revoke my clearance. That's how insane that time was. Anyway, so Scott Philpott didn't buy into the DI allegations. They put me back into play, and I was working behind the scenes to help them recreate able danger. That's it. That's what I was doing with the Navy. And so during this time, spring of 2005, I was working at Home Depot part-time to make extra money, which was like I was bored because I was suspended. So I was working at Home Depot and working with the Navy on recreating able danger as an Army reservist. So next thing you know, in May of 2005, I had orders. I was on orders, annual training orders, and assigned to the Pentagon to work with Navy. As a matter of fact, it says on my orders, place of assignment, U.S. Navy. That's it. It didn't even say like, the Navy's a pretty big place. So I guess they assumed I knew where I was going. So I ended up working for Navy. And during that period, Scott Philpott was looking for funding. And so Scott had went over and met with Kurt Weldon and asked Kurt Weldon at the time, Congressman Kurt Weldon was the vice chief of the House Armed Services Committee. And he met with Scott. Scott went over and briefed him on the new concept of what we wanted to do. And so it turned out, I didn't know this, nor did I really care. Navy officers can't just show up on Capitol Hill and ask for money. Who'd have thought? Who'd have thought that there'd be restrictions on that? So Navy's congressional liaison got really upset with Scott and said, you can't go to Capitol Hill and ask for money. Don't ever do that again. So Scott, being the bright guy he is, looked over at me as a resource and said, well, you're an Army guy. You can go ask for us. So Scott says, go get a suit on and go to the Pentagon. It's like, okay. So he's an 06, he's a captain, and I'm a lieutenant colonel, and I'm working for him. It's like, okay, I guess I can do this. So off I go. And I actually notify the Army. It's like, hey, Navy's sending me over to Capitol Hill to ask for something. The Army didn't care. It's like, yeah, if they're asking it, sure, go ahead. What do we care? So next thing you know, I'm in front of Kurt Weldon, and this is May of 2005, and I outlined what the Navy wants and needs. And Kurt looks at me. Congressman Weldon looks at me, says, well, you know, Tony, this is all well and good. I believe in this. You know, we funded Leewa's effort. It turned out he had funded the data mining technology Leewa had used back in 99, 2000. And he said, whatever happened to that? Whatever happened to that project that Eileen Pricer was doing? I said, oh, you don't know? He says, no, you know, we spent a lot of money. Whatever came of that? So I said, well, let me tell you. So I laid out to Kurt Weldon, Congressman Weldon, the exact same information I'd given to Phil Zelikow in October of 2003. And so at the end of the briefing, Kurt looks over at me, and he has Russ Queso, his chief of staff, in the room.
Yeah.
He looks over at me and says, well, why didn't you tell the 9/11 Commission? And I said, I did. And his face turned white. And it's like, and I looked over at Russ, it's like, well, yeah, they didn't say anything about it. I said, well, I always thought there was a classified annex. And Kurt says, no, Tony, there's no classified annex. It's like, oh boy. And I just felt the pit of my stomach drop. It's like, there's something really wrong. Because we had spent all this time trying to tell people quietly, because we didn't want to blow anything. We thought maybe that, you know, so they instantly go to verify what I had to say. And I get it. It's like, yeah, go figure out. So Russ Queso calls over to Chris Kojum. Chris is the 9/11 project's caretaker, whatever you want to call him, the 9/11 discourse project. And so Russ says, hey, Chris, we got an officer, Lieutenant Colonel Shaffer, who says that he'd made a disclosure to you guys on something called Able Danger. Could you check on that? So I'm told to wait. I'm hanging out there in Weldon's office. About 20 minutes goes by, and then now Russ Queso walks back in. And Russ looks like he'd been hit by a train. Russ Queso is 6'5" and a football player. And he looks like someone had hit him over the head with a bat. And he's just looks like he's shocked. And Kurt looks over and says, well, what did they have to say? And Russ looks at me and says, oh yeah, they know who Tony Shaffer is. They verified you spoke to them. And Kurt says, and says, yeah, they verified that you brought up Able Danger to them. And it was a road they chose to not go down and look at. And so I'm shocked. I think we all three were like, what? So that was the beginning of Able Danger, of the whole controversy, the Able Danger controversy. Because, you know, I wasn't there I wasn't there as a whistleblower. I was there to ask for money for the Navy to quietly recreate the Able Danger program. I had no intention of being a whistleblower. I was doing what operational intelligence officers do. You try to gain information, gain the capacity to collect the information and support operational forces in killing bad guys and doing good things. So that was it. That was why I was there with Kurt Weldon. I was not there to disclose as a whistleblower anything other than to say, hey, this is what happened. So
what you know, after, this will be the final, I promise. What after the Senate Judiciary Committee in 2006?
Yeah.
Why was there no follow-up investigations? Why did the story just basically die after that?
Well, we don't know. We honestly don't know. Look, Joe Biden was in, Senator Biden was in the original hearing with Arlen Specter. Arlen Specter, Senator Specter, pushed on this and recognized the DOD. He accused, rightfully, the DOD of lying to him, and DOD got caught lying to him during the hearing. It was the most amazing thing. Specter set him up, and they walked right into it, and he caught him lying. And then we had the House Armed Services Committee, and we had House Government Affairs Committee. Chris Shays. Chris Shays wrote a letter. I'll send you a copy. I got some other documents I want to send you to follow up. Chris Shays found that I was retaliated against for telling the truth. They found in their own investigation that they validated what I had to say. So, yeah, it all, and I was told during that time, Adam, that the reason it all went away is because neither side, neither the Democrats or the Republicans, could use what I was saying to gain any political advantage. As a matter of fact, both sides had almost equal responsibility. If you looked at the facts for the 9/11 failures, both political parties had a role. And I think that's what made it very unpopular. Nobody wanted to look at it because nobody could use it for advantage. Everybody had made mistakes and nobody wanted to take responsibility. So,
right. Well, I'm going to most likely have you back on again.
I'd love to.
And because I had so many other questions, but, I really did. But
well, Adam, please hold them and let's do it again, because I appreciate the opportunity to kind of let this all air out again after all these years. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. Because I'd like to get more into that Senate Judiciary Committee itself. But I'm at the bottom of the podcast. I'm going to link to your book, Operation Dark Heart, and to your website, the London Center for Policy Research, to let people know what you're doing at the current day. So,
yeah, Adam, by the way, we're currently doing an accountability project to help encourage whistleblowers. As a matter of fact, one of the things we're trying to do is help people like me. It's like, you know, a lot of people out there don't necessarily want to become whistleblowers because, you know, they know the bad. I didn't know the bad consequences because I didn't pay attention. It's like, you know, at one point we could talk about Denny Hastert, Speaker Hastert, actually personally met with me and asked me to come forward. So it's kind of like, what are you going to do? I think it's a great place to begin next time, maybe, is kind of how I ended up becoming a whistleblower over some of this stuff and what happened, because we do advocate for those who want to come forward and simply tell the truth. And it's not easy to do. Nobody in this town seems to be happy with the truth, no matter what it is. So,
I couldn't agree with you more. And the amount of, and also too, a unique case for you is that you didn't even plan on being a whistleblower.
No intentions, not at all.
No. Anthony Shaffer, thank you very much for today's episode.
Adam, thank you for having me. It's great to talk about this, and I look forward to being on with you again soon.
Sure.